At our church in Orlando, we invite everyone to stand for the words of assurance, as if to say, brother, sister, lift your head to the heavens, hear the good news of the gospel. So would you do that for me now? Stand, and we're going to read responsively these words of pardon, assurance, hope, and peace. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. He will not always accuse, nor will he keep his anger forever. He does not deal with us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. For as the heavens are high above the earth, so great is his steadfast love toward those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far he removes our transgressions from us. As a father has compassion for his children, so the Lord has compassion for those who fear him. Alleluia. In Jesus Christ, we are loved, accepted, and forgiven. Thanks be to God. We're going to sing about it now. Higher than the mountains that I face. Higher than the mountains that I face. Stronger than the power of the grave. Constant through the trial and the change. One thing remains. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Love. Try verse 2 with me. On and on it goes, the love of God. On and on and on and on it goes. And it overwhelms and satisfies my soul. And I never ever have to be afraid. 'Cause one thing remains. One thing remains. Your love never fails, it never gives, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Love. In death and life, I'm confident and covered by the power of your great love. My debt is paid, there's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. Sing love, your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Love. Beautiful singing, you may be seated. This song is called simply, Isn't That Amazing Grace? It goes like this. Underneath the countenance of God, we all try to hide. We forget how he loves us so. We forget we're Abba's child. So when the lights are loud, let the gospel drown them out. Come out, sinner, from those shadows. Every corner of your shame. Don't you know you're his beloved? You don't have to hide your face. Isn't that amazing grace? voices in our hearts, they're imposters in disguise. For they tell us we can't trust His love, but on ourselves we must rely. But when their lies allow, let the gospel drown them out. Come out, sinner, from those shadows, every corner of your shame. Don't you know you're His beloved? You don't have to hide your face, 'cause isn't that amazing grace? And don't believe the lies, 'cause you're beloved Abba's child. No more guilt and shame, 'cause isn't that amazing grace? Come out, sinner, from those shadows, every corner of your shame. Don't you know you're His beloved? You don't have to hide your face. Come out, sinner, from those shadows, every corner of your shame. And don't you know you're His beloved? So you don't have to hide your face. Isn't that amazing grace? Isn't that amazing grace? Father in heaven, we long to be a people who rest in our deepest identity as your beloved children. If we believed that, God, you would bring your kingdom to this earth as it is in heaven, because we would be able to obey your commands. So give us that sweet, sweet gift just for a moment today. Thank you. We praise you for the gospel, Jesus. And all of God's beloved children said, Amen.
Well, it's my privilege to introduce our speaker this morning, who's going to take us into the Word. It's been my privilege over the last year to work alongside our executive team, and I've just been hugely encouraged by the quality of leaders and just the fun and the energy and passion that each of our exec team members have for what God has called us to do. And over today and tomorrow, we're going to hear from a number of our vice presidents and from our president again, and starting today. And today, this morning, we had the privilege of hearing from Bekele Shanko. And Bekele was born and raised in Ethiopia. He completed his new staff training, and his first week after that, he became the national director for Ethiopia. So he's on a fast leadership development track. Then he became the director of affairs for the region, and then was invited to step into the role of vice president for global church movements. He also heads up and gives leadership to the Global Alliance for Church Multiplication. And I've just been really inspired by Bekele. He reminds me of he's just always energized, he's passionate, he has this vision, and he has an incredible ability to bring people together around a common purpose and common vision. So really excited to hear from you, Bekele, as you lead us into the Word this morning. Please welcome Bekele.
Good morning. We had a wonderful day yesterday, except one thing. Yes, we felt very sorry for Della and the West Africa team. And America were very proud, but wait for Germany. Yeah, one thing I learned yesterday from our trip in the afternoon, 400,000 people worked together very hard to send a man to the moon. And they came back. But we are working to send men and women to heaven. And many people don't even have a clue where heaven is. We are sending beyond the moon, beyond Mars to eternity. That's what we are involved in. It's so exciting. Yesterday, John McNeil took us through one of the core values of our movement, fruitfulness. And he emphasized again and again John 15:6, where Jesus said, "Without me, you can do nothing." Without me, you can do nothing. So God has called us to be fruitful. And today I'm taking us through one of our core values, faith. And we have 3 core values, as you know, and I believe you all know those values. And as I visit different countries and different areas, I see so many and different core values. But clarity and simplicity is always important for our unity and strength. Faith, growth, and fruitfulness. Yesterday when we saw Charlie Duke's video, this phrase captured my heart. When he was asked what message he has for us, he said, "Be on fire for Jesus." And he also said this: "Nothing is impossible with God." So today that's a theme of my message. And this message I gave back in February when we had GCM conference in Thailand. And I've been asked to give that message again. For those of you who are in Thailand, God is speaking to you again, maybe because you did not listen very carefully. Nothing is impossible with God. With God, all things are possible. This phrase, "Nothing is too hard, nothing is too impossible with God," has been used 4 times in the Bible. The first time we see was in relation to Sarah, where she laughed when God told Abraham that he was going to visit them after 1 year, and she heard and she laughed. And God said, "Is anything too difficult for God?" And the second person was Jeremiah, where God told the children of Israel that he was going to send them into Babylonian captivity. And at the same time, he spoke to Jeremiah, "I want you to buy a field or a land in Israel." And God was, for Jeremiah, it was a confusing message. God was going to send Israelites to Babylonian captivity, but he wanted his prophet to buy land. And Jeremiah did not understand. And God's message was, "Is anything too hard for God?" And he repeats twice to Jeremiah. And the other person was Mary, teenager, virgin, and God appears to her, and he tells her that you are going to be the mother of Jesus. And God says, anything too hard for God? And the last group of people were the disciples. When the rich man, after hearing Jesus, he could not do what Jesus asked him to do. And the disciples asked, "Who else? How can this happen then?" And Jesus says everything is possible. So today I'm focusing on Abraham. Abraham as a father of faith, as a father who started the Hebrew nation. I'm going to look at different chapters in the first book of the Bible. Who is Abraham? Abraham was introduced, or is introduced to us in chapter 11 of Genesis. And Abraham dies in chapter 25. So about 14 chapters have been given to this man, Abraham. He received God's call, God's covenant and promises at age 75. And God promised him, he promised him a land. I will show you. And God was not very clear where he wanted to lead Abraham, but he said, trust in me, I will lead you to a new land. It's an unknown location. I will show you. God, in a sense, was saying, I am responsible. You just trust in me. And he also promised greatness to Abraham. I will make you into a great nation. I will make your name great. And he promises great blessings. Personal blessings, as well as blessings of influence. I will bless you. That's the personal blessings. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. That is influence blessings. And he promises blessings. In just 2 verses in chapter 12, the word bless or blessing is used 5 times. And God's intention for Abraham was to bless him and many nations through him. So that was God's promise to this man. And the name was changed from Abram to Abraham. And those 2 letters, H-A, make a significant change. Abraham means high, or a father of elevation, or exalted. And God changes that to Abraham, a father of many nations. So he gives the picture of his destiny when he changed his name. And we find in the Bible the word Abram or Abraham 292 times. And Abraham progresses in his spiritual development from chapter 12 to chapter 22, where he becomes an amazing man of God who was willing to sacrifice his one and only son. But the journey were ups and full of ups and downs. And when I read this verse, that Abraham was willing to sacrifice his one and only son, it reminds me of John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. And if you could apply that verse to Abraham, for Abraham so loved the Lord that he was willing to give his one and only son. He grew to become that kind of person who loved the Lord so much. He even believed that God could raise his son from the dead. That's why he was willing to sacrifice. Abraham was or is an example of absolute obedience and a man of faith in action. And Apostle Paul, or whoever ever wrote the book of Romans, gives this conclusion to Abraham, about Abraham. Abraham, against all hope, in hope, believed. And 3 words describe Abraham: Abraham believed God. He is an example of faith. And yet, this man, a great man of God, he had fears in his life. And as I studied those chapters from 12 to 25, I could find 5 greatest fears in Abraham's life. You know, fear is the enemy of faith. They don't go together. Either I have faith or I have fear. When you have fear, you lack faith. When you have faith, you lack fear. You become bold and courageous. And that's why the apostles prayed in the book of Acts chapter 4. When they were threatened by the Jewish leaders, they asked God to fill them with boldness and courage and faith. This man had fears in his life. The first fear of safety. Just in chapter 12, Abraham begins his journey. He obeys the Lord. And on his way, he faces famine. And he decides to go to Egypt. And he begins to think about the environment that he was in. And he speaks to his wife, Sarah. Sarah, my wife, you are so beautiful. But now I want to ask you to say that you are my sister. Because the Egyptians will see you, the people of Aziz will see you. And they may kill me. Please say that you are my sister for 2 reasons. One, I will be treated well. That we call selfishness. And my life will be spared. He was thinking about his personal safety over the covenant that God gave this family and over his wife, over the family that God chose to use to bring out the seed, the son, who will crush the head of the serpent. Say you are my sister. Abraham was afraid. Fear led Abraham to compromise. Fear led him to deception and to self-defense strategies. They will kill me because of my wife. It's not only once. In chapter 12, he said that, or he did that again in chapter 20, when he went to Philistine, and when he feared that the Philistines, that Abimelech might take his wife. Again, he made the same mistake because of his fear. The second fear Abraham had was a fear of his heir. Who will inherit me? He waited for a number of years, I think by this time, 8, 9 years, and he was fearful. And that's why God came to him in chapter 15, fear not, because God knew that Abraham was afraid. Fear not. His heir promises of blessing all the nations. How is that going to happen? That was Abraham's question. God, you told me, but how is that going to happen? And Abraham talks to God. God, I remain childless. And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus, this Syrian, who is a chief of staff in my home. He is the only one who is going to inherit. I don't have a child. I have enough reason to be afraid, God. The third fear is fear of his land. In chapter 15, verse 7, God says, listen, Abraham, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur to give you this land. I am the one who is going to give you this land. I'm responsible. I took the initiative. I came down to you. I called you. I promised you. I will fulfill. And then the immediate verse, Abraham says, how can I know that I will gain possession of this land? You know, sometimes we are like that. We have seen God doing so many miracles in our lives, and then the next moment, we doubt. How is this going to happen? Where is my next support going to come? That happens to me. But God is responsible, brothers and sisters. That's what he was saying to Abraham. I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur to give you this land. The fourth fear is his home. And you know what happened in chapter 16? Sarah invents a strategy to accelerate the fulfillment of the promise. And she comes to me with this great vision. She says, my dear husband, I have an idea. It seems to me and to us that this promise of God is not taking place. And I have this woman whom we picked up from Egypt when we went to Egypt in chapter 12, Hagar. Why don't you go and sleep with her and have a baby, and that baby will become the fulfillment or the way or the means that the promise will be fulfilled. And Abraham listens, and they make wrong decision. After that, that home becomes a place of trouble. One trouble after another. One problem after another. Despising, mocking, blaming each other, rejection, conflict, harsh words, distress. And in America, they say domestic violence, running away. All these problems came to Abraham's home. And we know what we feel when we have challenges at home. Abraham had a fear of his family problems. And then the fifth fear is his age. In verse 17, verse 18, chapter 17, chapter 18, 24 years had passed after God had given him the promise. And God comes to Abraham, and the writer writes very carefully, when Abraham was 99 years old. It's very specific and with purpose that Abraham's age was mentioned twice. When Abraham was 99 years old, God appears to him. So time was running out. They waited for 24 years. Ishmael came. Eliezer was proposed. At that time, Boaz laughed. Abraham laughs in chapter 17, and Sarah laughs in chapter 18. It cannot be done. I am too old. I am too old. Warren Wiersbe, who wrote Bible commentary, he says, God was waiting for them to be as good as dead, so that God alone will receive the power and the glory. What fears do you have? You are great leaders this morning. Great leaders with wonderful experiences of so many years. But I'm sure you have fear. And I have fear. What would be your fears this morning? As you face the future, as you face tomorrow, your nation, your areas. I have fears of my own. You know, my family and I have been on the move, moving from Ethiopia to Zimbabwe to South Africa to the US. And every time we moved from lower economy to higher economy, to higher economy, to higher economy. And every time we moved, our support has to increase, go up and go up. And that means there was no way that we could save money for the future. Every time we move, we use all that we have. And sometimes I have this fear in me. What about my financial security? If something happens to me, what would happen to my family, to my children? That's real fear. Real fear. And sometimes this fear comes to me. As global church movements, we are trusting God to see 5 million faith communities and churches started by the end of 2020. And sometimes the devil comes and says, are you sure you want to see that? Sometimes those fears come. And each of us experience those moments in our lives. Abraham had fears, but God responded to Abraham, and I want to focus on God's response in the remaining few minutes. First, Abraham was afraid of his safety. God intervenes. When both times in chapter 12 and 20, when Abraham was afraid and Sarah said, I'm his sister, she was taken. You know, when she was taken, the enemy wanted to destroy that covenant family so that the Messiah would not come through that family. That was what the enemy was trying to do. And God had to intervene both times. God intervened both times, and he rescues Sarah. He rescues the family. He keeps the covenant. He keeps the family intact. And he even tells, in chapter 20, he tells the Philistine leader, he tells, Abraham is my prophet. He will pray for you. That's how God protects his people. He intervenes. He rescues Sarah, protects Abraham, saves the marriage, keeps the covenant. That's who our God is. When Abraham was afraid of his heir who would inherit his inheritance, God assures him, fear not, Abraham. That's the first assuring verse we see in the Bible, chapter 15, verse 1. And the Bible teachers tell us that there is this promise 365 times in the Bible. For every day, one promise, fear not. Today is June 17, 2014. And we have this promise this morning, fear not. I am your shield, your very great reward. I am your shield means I protect you. I'm your very reward means I provide for you. Fear not. This man from Syria will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will inherit. And God takes Abraham out of his maybe tent, and he says, look up, Abraham, look up. Try to count the stars in heaven. Look up. Your hope comes from above. Your descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the skies. I am able to do that. When Abraham was afraid of his land, God reminds him of his faithfulness. He says, to your descendants, I give this land. Trust me. Trust me. To your descendants, I give this land. And when Abraham was troubled by his family problems, you know, Hagar was sent out twice. The first time she came back because the angel came and he said, go back. So she was sent out twice. Then the next time she never came back. That was it. The first time the angel of the Lord found Hagar in the desert. And he said, go back to your mistress and submit to her. And God solves the family problems, comes in to solve the family problems. And the next time when she was sent away, God again appears to her. And he hears the cries of the baby. And he opens her eyes to see the water around her. How God cares for his people. Today, I want to assure you, God sees your needs and my needs. He protects you. He provides for you. He cares for you. That's the God we have who promised to be with us always. Always means every step. You know, there are two words. That's English is not my language, but always means all the way. Every step, every moment, God is with you to protect, to provide, to guide, to lead, to use. And finally, Abraham's age, when he was afraid that he was 99 years old or he was getting too old, God comes to him and he says, your wife Sarah, who is too old to bear a child, she will bear you a son, and you will call him Laughter, Isaac, because that's what I can do. Nothing is too hard for me. I am God El Shaddai. I am God Almighty. The son will come from your old wife, Sarah. Is anything too hard for the Lord? And Sarah will have a son. I'm God Almighty. Walk before me faithfully and be blameless. That's your responsibility. Walk before me blameless and faithful. I will keep my covenant and will greatly increase your numbers. Because of God's greatness, God is able to do the impossible. Do we believe in him? You know, as a movement, we are trusting God for 10 million multiplying disciples. God is going to do it. Our part is just to trust and to walk with him and to work with him. And as I facilitate the GCM and work with the Global Alliance members and my wonderful team, we are trusting God to see a church or a faith community planted in every neighborhood, every village, every high-rise apartment, including the iPad screen and cell phone screen by the end of 2020. When the devil says, this cannot happen, we say with God, all things are possible. And it's God, it's all about God. Because he does not want anyone to perish. He wants people to come into his loving arm for eternity. And we are passionate about Christ. We want to be on fire for Jesus. And it can happen, and it will happen, because God's promise is with us. You know, as we come together as Global Alliance members, last April we came together in Dallas, And we gather reports just from 14 church planting organizations. And according to our reports in the past few years, about 588,000 churches have been started. And God is already moving. And He will fulfill what He has given us. Fear not. Believe in God. He is almighty. Nothing is too hard for Him. So today, I want your heart, your mind, your spirit to be full of faith. Fear not, but be filled with faith. And I want you to take the next few minutes around your table and talk about these things. What are your top 3 fears? If you say, I don't have any fear, then you are not telling the truth. You can think about personal, family, ministry. Be vulnerable to each other and share what are some of your fears and why do you need to trust God. You have about 5 minutes to do that, and I will close in a word of prayer.